Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from everywhere you are. I'm so happy to be here with another session with Microsoft Zero to Hero. Today we have another great session, and the topic it was very interesting. And before we start the session, let me share some slides with you. Let me share my slide. Yes, today we have Mikhail here. He wants to talk about the 50 ways to secure our Azure environment. I think you need to note all of the 50 ways. I think it's very interesting. And actually, as you know, we are part of Microsoft Learn Community. Microsoft Learn Community is a central hub about a lot of learning content. You can choose your learning path with a certificate, your with a role, with other things. You can join aka.ms Microsoft Learn Community. And this is our Microsoft Zero to Hero October calendar. Did you register for future session? If not, please register, reserve your seat, and all of previous session uploaded on our YouTube channel. The last slide is our code of conduct. Be aware of other, be friendly and patient, be welcoming and respectful, be open to our question and viewpoint, be understanding on difference, be kind and considerate to others in the chat, in the question, and so on. And the time is to add Mikhail in the stage. Hello, Mikhail.
Hey Mohsen, how are you? Good to be here and
I'm
thanks for having me on
fine.
Zero to Hero.
Thank you again for accepting your request. And we are so happy to be here. The topic is very interesting because, as you know, the security is very important in the all of cloud solution or other things. And I'm in my individual. I'm waiting for your 50 ways to how to secure my cloud Azure environment.
Well, let's hope I can give you 50 ways. So let me share screen here and let me present the
Yeah,
session and I'll tell
nice,
you a little bit about me as well. So give me one
nice,
second. Let's
great.
see if I can get this up.
Okay, we have your
Okay,
screen.
hopefully you can see that. Brilliant.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So, um, as you said, the session is called 50 Ways to Secure Your Azure. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself first. My name is Michael Durkan. I am Microsoft Azure MVP. I'm based in Ireland. I've been a MVP in the program for the last 2 years now. I'm an Azure Solutions Architect. I've also written a LinkedIn learning course on the AZ 801 part of that exam, so go check that out as well. I hold multiple Azure certifications, and I love speaking and I love creating content both for YouTube and on my blog, and also for the Microsoft Learn community. And I love sharing with the community in general. So let's jump into the session. And normally at this time in the session, I normally give a little intro and a little bit of inspiration here. So the session is inspired by a song. And if you think about 50 ways to secure your Azure, you can probably guess what song I'm talking about. And if we take a look at the first set of lyrics of the song, it is indeed 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover by Paul Simon, which may surprise people. That song is nearly 50 years old now, but it's one of those timeless classics. And anytime it comes on the radio, I think for the rest of the day, you find yourself humming away to the song. I'm not going to start singing because believe me, you do not want to hear my singing voice. I think we'd lose an awful lot of viewers if that happened. So please don't worry and please don't turn off now because I'm not going to sing. But one time I was listening and I heard that song and I was humming it away for the day as we all do. And I got a bit inspired and I thought, well, hold on a sec. There has to be 50 ways to secure your Azure. So what I did was I started composing a few lines of, how the song would go. And instead of the problem being all in your head, the problem is all up in the cloud. RBAC, PIM, and firewalls, App Gateway will help for sure. There must be 50 ways to secure your Azure. What I'm trying to do in this session is to kind of bring you through that cloud security journey and bring you through building that secured Azure environment up from scratch, taking into account identities, networking, application and data security, all the way up to secure access and all the way up to a demonstration at the end of what would be a normal flow of a landing zone and an example of a landing zone that you would build with all of these security components built in. So let's move in. And obviously there is this common misconception up there. So, once we migrate up to the cloud from our on-premises, as a lot of companies are doing now, all of our infra security issues are going to be resolved. Well, it's not that simple. It's quite simple to put something into the cloud, but securing it's a totally different story because you've got a massive, massive surface in the cloud for cyber attacks. And also there is the opportunity there for misconfiguration. So we're going to dive in and take a look at that now. So obviously, more and more organizations are adopting that cloud first approach to enable them to modernize their services, transform their operations with agility and scale. But security and compliance remains the greatest barrier to adoption. And if you combine that with the difficulties in addressing the complexity of secure configurations and a shortage of these skills, these challenges can be major roadblocks on that cloud first journey. So what we need to do with that is introduce a set of best practices. And the normal best practices we would look at is, first of all, let's design and deploy base security controls to create a secure landing zone on the cloud solution provider platform. That can be Azure or that can be any other cloud provider platforms such as AWS, GCP. Yes, I did say the names of those companies on a Microsoft Learn webcast, but it's important to know that all cloud providers are the same and they need to have those security controls put in place. The next thing, you integrate the security controls. So you design reusable cloud solution provider templates for your past solutions and you integrate those with your security controls. And then finally, from a best practices perspective, you need to combine the platform security and those services and bring those together with your existing client enterprise security tools. And more importantly for clients, with your operational processes and procedures. Okay, so what are the actions that we've got to take out of this? Okay, well, it's quite simple. We need to spell out the roles that are authorized to operate in the environment and what they're allowed to do. Secondly, we need secure connectivity to on-premises data. And normally in a cloud, we look at hub and spoke connectivity. So you've got a single point of entry. That's your hub. That could be your firewall or your application gateway, which we'll get into now in a second. And then you move that down into your different spokes. And even your spokes could have firewalls or application gateways attached to them as well, depending on what services you have deployed. And finally, then we're going to enhance and we're going to secure those configuration policies and we're going to apply the cloud service provider platform security controls and we'll enforce that by policy. And of course, Azure policy can do that for us. Okay, so if we look at what the common threats are in cloud environments, and as you can see here, I've put in the photo of the common hacker who is sitting with all of his screens around, and this is what the common photo that we all see. But I think we all know that that's not what all hackers look like. Hackers can come in all shapes and sizes. They're not just teenagers with hoodies sitting behind a load of screens, okay? So if we look at the common threats that are there in cloud environments, I touched on it already. The first one is misconfiguration, and that's one of the leading causes of cloud data breaches. The reason for that is cloud infrastructure is designed to be easily usable and enable easy data sharing, but because of its complexity, it's easy for a misconfiguration or a security oversight to leave your organization's cloud-based resources exposed to attackers. If we look at unauthorized access as the next threat, so unlike an on-premises infrastructure where you may have a firewall sitting in front that, and it could be a next generation firewall that, is going to handle all of your platform, IP and application level security and firewalls. Cloud-based deployments are sitting outside of your network perimeter, and in most cases, they are directly accessible for the internet. Again, we're going back to ease of use and convenience here. And this is convenient for accessibility of the environment for both employees and customers, but it also makes it easier for an attacker to gain unauthorized access to an organization's resources. And that can sometimes happen without an organization's knowledge. If we move on to unsecured interfaces and APIs, And this is normally a case where APIs are provided by CSPs for customers, and they're normally pretty well documented. And it's an attempt to make them easily usable for those customers. But because they're quite easily documented and mostly publicly available and out there, they can be used by a cyber criminal to gain access. Okay. And that misconfiguration and those unsecured interfaces can be a potential attack surface. Let's move on to the next one, which is hijacking of accounts. This is getting into weak password security. We've all seen it. We've all seen people whose password is password01 with a capital P, an at instead of the A, and a 0 instead of the O. It's still out there. It's still in use. Okay. The problem is exacerbated then by the reuse of those weak passwords across a person's different cloud identities. So things like LinkedIn, Twitter, Gmail. If you're extending that password policy that you're using into your corporate environments, that's an attack service, because it means if one person's identity gets compromised on one platform, there is the potential for it to be compromised in another. Moving on to another one, which is visibility, and we're getting into things like traditional monitoring platforms here. I think we're all agreed that within the cloud, there is no one size fits all for monitoring. Okay, the traditional platforms that we use for on-premises visibility are not effective for cloud environments because of the scale and the different types of services that are being deployed. Okay, and that means that there is no single pane of glass that you can have to monitor your resources and protect them against attack. We talked about external data sharing a second ago. How many times have we right clicked on something in our OneDrive and clicked share and forgotten about it and walked away? Okay. Again, we're talking about the cloud was designed to be easy and it's designed to make data sharing easy. But many clouds provide the option to explicitly invite internal and external users or just share a link, as I said, via OneDrive or email. Okay. It's a convenient tool, but it's a major cloud security issue unless it is properly secured. Malicious insiders are, of course, I talked about our friend with the hoodie here in front of his screens. It's not just him. Malicious insiders are there, and they're a major threat for any security, for any organization. What you've got to remember is malicious insiders already have authorized access to your organization's network and to those resources. That makes it really hard for an unprepared organization to detect that malicious attacker. We've then got cyber attacks, and cyber attacks, again, because cloud-based security is directly accessible from the public internet, it's often improperly secured, and it contains a great deal of sensitive and valuable data. Also, the cloud is used by many different companies, and it means that a successful attack can probably be repeated multiple times with a high probability of success. Okay, and that's why cloud deployments are often a common target for cyber criminals. Finally, denial of service attacks. And the cloud is essential to many organizations' ability to do business. The cloud can be used to store your business critical data and run your important internal and customer facing applications. And a successful denial of service attack against cloud infrastructure will have a major impact on your business, both for your internal and your external customers. So, how does this fit in with Azure security architecture and how it all ties together? So, we're going to start with, the one we all know, which is how does it all look? And we look at the security chart that I've got here at the top of the screen, and you can see the different layers that surround Azure security. Again, as I said, this isn't just for Azure. This is for any cloud provider. This also probably is coming from your on-premises governance and risk processes as well. So you've got things like your identity, your threat protection, your information protection, compliance, information governance. And all of these things are important when it comes to the shared responsibility model. We need to be aware of this because effectively the shared responsibility model means that depending on what service you deploy, you have various responsibility for where your data is. Okay. Now, again, the key thing to remember here, for any cloud deployment type, whether that be SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, on-prem, and again, you've got the responsibility for various different things. If it's IaaS, you're responsible for the applications and the operating systems, okay? But at all times, you are responsible for protecting the security of your data and identities, your endpoints, and your accounts, okay? And cloud components you control vary by service type. So regardless of that deployment, you just need to remember that you have those responsibilities. And that's where we're going to start. So if we're going to build our landing zone, we need to first decide on what identity and access management solution we're going to use. And obviously, because we live in Microsoft world, we're going to use Entra ID. Now, the thing with Entra ID is there's a number of different versions of it, and not as much versions, but we'll call them different SKU levels that are available to us. So as you can see here, you can start off with a free SKU level, which is the old security defaults level. And that's going to give you MFA and mobile app as a second factor, and then your self-service password reset. Sounds okay, doesn't it? But is it really enough for you to protect your identities? If you then move up, and you put administrators and give people administrator access, you can have SMS as a second factor, and you can have admin control over verification methods. But do you really want to give people admin access? No, that's a bad idea, because we're trying to limit the amount of admins we have. If we move up and we're using Office 365 as the next level, as you can see, that list expands. But really, what we should be doing is looking at our Entra Premium P1 and P2 SKUs. Okay. The great thing about those is you've got your privileged identity management built in, which is backed by your role-based access control. And we've also got things like multi-factor authentication, which we already have, but that can be enhanced. And you've got identity governance as part of access packages as well. You can also see there from the chart that you've got things like risk-based conditional access control, where you can detect identities coming from specific geographies, and that can detect things like brute force attacks. So let's now move into network security now that we've got our identity sorted. Okay. And for most people, a network, when they think of Azure, they'll think, okay, I'm going to create a resource group and I'm going to put a virtual network in there and I'm going to create subnets. Okay. Best practice security, if you're deploying a multi-tiered service or multi-tiered application in Azure that's using multiple Azure services, you'd have VNets broken into subnets, and you'd have network security groups assigned to each one of those subnets. You then go a step further and you set up route tables with user-defined routes. And what you're going to do with those user-defined routes is you're going to send all of those back to Azure Firewall. So any outbound traffic coming from your environment that's going out to the internet is going to be inspected by Azure Firewall first. Okay, that ensures that not only you are protected, but your end receiver of the data that you're sending out is protected as well. Finally, then, between all of the services, we can look at things like virtual network service endpoints and private links, which, enhance that security. And it means that, only services that need to talk to each other can, and there's no outside access. Data security is one of the most important things, and we looked at that as part of the common security threats that were available. Okay. And Azure provides us with a number of different options for data security. So first of all, we've got Azure Storage Encryption. Now, Azure encrypts all data stored automatically in Azure Storage accounts at rest by using 256-bit AES encryption, and that applies to blobs, files, queues, and tables. And you've also got server-side encryption as well, which means the data is encrypted before storing it, and it's decrypted when accessed. You've then got Azure Key Vault, and that helps safeguard your cryptographic keys, secrets, and certificates. You've got key management to store those. You've also got secret management to store and control access to sensitive configuration data. And you also have certificates to store and manage your certificates for securing your SSL and TLS connections. From a database perspective, you've got Azure SQL Database Security, and that can provide multiple layers of security to protect data in transit and at rest. Okay, so you've got things like transparent data encryption, excuse me, which encrypts the entire database at rest automatically using AES encryption. You've got always encrypted, which protects sensitive data such as credit card numbers within the database by encrypting it on the client side by sending it to Azure, or things like dynamic data masking, which obfuscates sensitive data by controlling how much information is returned to users based on their role. Finally, that should say Azure Disk Encryption, which is used to encrypt the disks for OS and data of Azure virtual machines. And that uses BitLocker to provide full disk encryption for Windows VMs or de-encrypt for Linux VMs. going to take a drink before I start coughing again. Excuse me. Um, let's move into application security. Okay, so we've sorted our identities, we've got our network secured, we've now got our data secured. Now, what about the applications that we're going to build? Well, a couple of options we've got here. First of all, we've got Azure Application Gateway with Web Application Firewall. Okay, and what you've got there is that is normally your entry point for applications. If your users are sending data in, or for example, if you've got a messaging application, it'll come in via an Azure Application Gateway and you'll expose your APIs to the application gateway. Okay. What you've got with that is the OWASP core rule set version 3.2, okay? And that is the industry standard for things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, among other things, okay? Um, let's move into API management now. And I talked about the APIs that were going to be exposed to the application gateway. But used together, these two services provide you with, a really, really strong security posture for your applications. Some of the things that that API management offer you. So you can have API gateway. So all traffic passes through the API gateway where you've got policies, security measures, and monitoring are applied before the requests hit the actual backend services. You can apply authentication and authorization to your APIs by enforcing user authentication. You've got rate limiting and throttling, and you can configure that to protect your APIs from abuse and prevent denial of service attacks. And it ensures that no single client can overwhelm your API backend by making excessive requests. It's obviously got API whitelisting and blacklisting to ensure that you can secure your APIs against specific addresses if you trust those addresses, or blacklist those addresses if you don't. And you've then got SSL and TLS support, which ensures that all communications between clients and API management gateway are encrypted. And we can also deploy mutual TLS here to ensure that both the client and the API service authenticate against each other. Finally, we can look at secure deployments, and we can look at secure deployments from both Azure DevOps and GitHub. And we can do that using things like workload identity federation for secure deployments against service connections. And if we go a little bit further into that, then for things like drift detection from Terraform or Defender for Cloud, which includes code pipeline insights, that's how we can secure our applications and our deployments. Let's jump into monitoring and detection now. Okay, so we've got our identity, our network, our data secured, our application is protected. Okay, we still need to monitor it though. Okay, and all of those services that I looked at on the last slide will provide monitoring and will integrate with the likes of Sentinel and Log Insights. Okay, we've obviously got Defender for Cloud, which is an extensive suite of products that are available to us. We'll get into that more in a second. That gives us DevSecOps, which is our code scanning, which I mentioned previously. You've got your CSPM, which is available at a free level, and the free level will give you things like secure score and policy management. When you then enable the paid tier, it's going to give you an awful lot more. Enabling Defender for Cloud is also going to automatically integrate you with Defender XDR, which was previously Defender for 365, and that's going to protect your 365 deployments as well. And then you've got cloud workload platform protection as well, okay? And that's going to give you all of the various features that are focused features in Defender. So things like Defender for storage, Defender for app service, Defender for APIs, which we've just managed. So that's another layer we can stick on top of API management. We've got Defender for databases, Defender for containers. We've also got Defender for key vaults available. There's lots more of them. I could be here talking all night about the various options that are available in the Defender suite, but they're all really, really good and really good value for that overall cloud security posture. Coming down back then into the portal level, you're looking at Azure Advisor recommendations. They're available there. They're on the blade, opening blade of every service, giving you advice on things like scaling, monitoring, etc. Okay, and then of course we've got Azure Monitor and Log Analytics. And normally what we'll do is we will send the diagnostic logs from all of our services into Azure Monitor and Log Analytics. And from there, you can create things like custom and built-in custom queries, Azure workbooks, or you can integrate with a third-party service such as Grafana for visualizations. Finally, we're looking at Microsoft Sentinel. And of course, Microsoft Sentinel is our cloud native SIEM and SOAR solution, okay, which can collect data from multiple Azure services, from on-premises systems, and from third-party sources as well. It uses advanced analytics and machine learning to detect security anomalies. It's got automated response built in, and it's got that integration with Defender and other SIEM tools for full-scale monitoring and detection. If we go a little bit deeper then into threat protection and response, okay, and the first thing we're going to look at here is Azure DDoS protection. I mentioned our hub and spoke earlier, and normally what you do is on your hub, you'd implement DDoS protection, okay, and that's going to protect your applications from distributed denial of service attacks. It's continuously monitoring traffic flows. It detects abnormal increases in traffic and patterns associated with DDoS attacks. It'll automatically mitigate those attacks by scaling up resources and diverting traffic, and it'll provide detailed analytics and attack reports through Azure Monitor. Okay, so really great tool that can be applied at either full tenant level if you wish, or you can go at IP level. That depends on the size of your environment, the scale of your environment, what you're using. Okay, we've then got Defender for Identity, and Defender for Identity is the new name for Azure Advanced Threat Protection. Okay, and that's going to track user activities and behaviors to detect, credential theft, lateral movement attacks, brute force attacks, privileged account abuse, and again, that's going to integrate back into Sentinel as well. Finally, I talked about instant response linked to Azure security benchmarks. Okay, so Azure policy has got security benchmarks built in, such as CIS, NIST, PCI DSS. Okay, and you can enforce those standards and those industry standards and benchmarks with Azure policy. Just to note, when you deploy Azure policy, it comes with the default Azure security benchmark built in, and you can just change that to apply CIS, NIST, ISO 27001, whichever one is relevant to you and your organization. So from a security best practices perspective, if we take a look at that as a kind of a wide view, we're looking at principle of least privilege. Okay, so we're getting back into our identity here. Okay, everything should be, based on Azure resources. We should limit the number of global admin roles we have, using things like, just-in-time access, privileged identity management, and identity governance and access management, and regular reviews. Okay, regular security audits and compliance checks. I think we're gone beyond the days now where we did 2 compliance and security audits a year just as box ticking exercises. That's continuously available to us as part of Sentinel, as part of Defender for Cloud, as part of Azure policy as well. That's going to report to us on where the compliance issues and where the security issues are in our organization, if any new issues occur. We then have to think about data and backup strategies. Okay, and obviously, Azure has got various different data backup strategies available to you there, and these can help prevent issues with attack and recovery from attack and misconfiguration as well. So for PaaS services in Azure example, you would have, various different services have their own tools. So for example, in app service, you would use things like staging slots. For Cosmos DB, that has continuous backup mechanisms over either 7 or 30 days, whichever one you choose. Obviously, then if you go to IaaS for VMs, SQL, or storage, you've got Azure Backup available to you there. Okay, or else what you can do is you can integrate with a third-party solution such as a Veeam, Commvault, Rubrik, Veritas, whatever your preferred provider is. And again, if you have the availability and if you're already using those services on premises, it may be a better idea for you to have that backup strategy extended up into Azure. But you've got to remember, if we move towards PaaS services, that's not going to work, and you need to combine. So we've looked at the various Azure security tools and integrations that are available to us. Okay, and obviously we've got things like, Defender for Cloud, which I went into, which is an extensive security tool, can touch on various services, not just, standard cloud security posture management, but deep dive into the tools such as storage, APIs, etc. Okay, we've then got Sentinel, which can do runbooks, instant response, automated threat hunting, and all of the various Azure services will integrate with that as well to send details of logs or attacks to Sentinel, and it can act on those, and you can build playbooks based on that. You've then got Azure Information Protection, or Purview, as it's now known. And that's an underlying compliance tool for your data. Okay. And that's also going to scan that data to make sure that, you don't have any malicious insiders inside your organization. Again, we have to touch on third-party integrations, and that's where multi-cloud comes in. And obviously from an Azure perspective, we can use a tool like Arc. And Arc can be extended out to AWS and GCP if you've got particular services running there and you want to have them in a single pane of glass. And you can also extend it back to on-premises as well. Of course, the other option you have is you may not want to use any of these Azure or Microsoft built-in security tools, and you can output to other tools or other vendors. And I'm talking about things like Qualys, QRadar, or Datadog if you choose to send your logs out to those vendors. So I'm also just finally going to touch on secure access, okay? And a number of different options available to you here. You've got Azure Virtual Desktop, obviously, really popular service at the minute, really good service that's available there. And you can obviously VNet integrate that and have multiple Azure Virtual Desktop instances running for whatever service you want to touch, okay? That can come and you can deliver remote apps or else a full remote desktop to your users as well. And for remote desktops, obviously, you can have either personal or pooled desktops if required, okay? As I said, I like Azure Virtual Desktop, good service. What does it do though? It introduced some management overhead where you're talking about image management as well. Because if you're not going for a default image and if you decide to have customizations built into your image, you have to manage both the security of the image, and you can probably do that via something like Intune, but then also the underlying applications as well. Windows 365 Cloud PC, really popular service, starting to gain a lot of traction as well. And that's linked to individual users, and that's a per user license assignment that's coming from your Microsoft 365 users. Okay. Different SKUs involved in that. Is it a comparable service? Maybe, maybe not. There are certain SKUs that you can VNet integrate into Azure if you wish. Okay. The other one, of course, for secure access is Bastion. Okay. And Bastion is your hardened platform controlled security jump box. Okay. It is a single point of access. You can use it across peered VNets. The thing to remember of Bastion though is it's not configurable. Okay, at the minute it can host scale. There is a preview feature at the minute where it's available across availability zones, but just to remember that's not configurable. Okay, and also it can get quite costly as well depending on the amount of users that you've got accessing Bastion. So with all of that, I'm just going to throw this up on the screen, and this is, let's call it a sample landing zone slash diagram to show a lot of the things that I've been talking about here so far. Okay, so as you can see, we've got our internal, external users hitting our application gateway up there on the left. They're coming in via the application gateway. That's protected with your WAF policy, running your OWASP core rule set 3.2. And just to say about the app gateway and the OWASP core rule set, when it is applied, it is the epitome of zero trust security. What you're normally going to find when you turn it on is nothing works. And that's the point of it. That's the point of zero trust. You will only create the exclusions that you need to create in order for your application to function. Okay. Normally then application gateway, as you can see then down here, we've got an application resource group. We've got a virtual network with a user defined route attached to it, but each of our services are running in their own subnet. So you've got an API management subnet, you've got a container subnet, Cosmos subnet, and so on and so forth. Then up at the top, we've got our security resource group where our log analytics, Azure Monitor, Sentinel, and App Insight sit. We've then got our secure deployments and our DNS zones sitting up in our management subnet, and also our private build agents that are used by DevOps to deploy into our environments. Our corporate office connects up via either site-to-site VPN or ExpressRoute via a virtual network gateway. And all the traffic going outbound back to the internet is going via the Azure firewall, as we said, and that's where your UDRs come in. It all sends them back that way. And then up at the top, we've got all the various services we talked about. We've got Defender for Cloud, got DDoS protection, Azure load testing, great tool to actually right size your environments as well. And then we've got our integrations with 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop as well. Okay, so that's just a kind of a sample of that. Again, May not be perfect. Some people may like it, some people may not, but that's kind of an example of all that I've been talking about here. So I've talked a lot, and there's now a question of how you stay up to date with Azure security, because as you've probably seen as part of this presentation, there's a lot to Azure security. Okay, so a couple of things you can do, and obviously you've got the old conventional methods with your certifications, and there's now a number of Azure security certifications available. Within Azure, we've got the built-in Azure one, which is the AZ500, the Azure Security Administrator Cert. Okay, still a great certification to have. I think when Microsoft retired the old MS500, which was the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 security certification, a lot of people thought that AZ500 was going to go away, but it didn't. It's persisted, and it's good to see it persisting there, because as you can see within Azure, there's a big security presence, and I don't think that can go away really. Okay. Um, We've then got our new set of security exams, and there's a new security track that's come in the last couple of years. And obviously, like all Microsoft tracks, that starts with fundamentals. So you've got your SC900 that's available there. That's your fundamentals, which gives you an overview of the full security set. Okay. Then got SC200, which is an exam that is aimed a lot at Defender, Sentinel, all of that sort of stuff. SC300 is effectively an identity and access exam, getting deep into Entra, B2B, B2C, service endpoints, all of that sort of security. And then you've got SC400, which is a compliance information protection focused, and that gets really deep into Purview, Azure Information Protection, and the compliance elements involved. And as always, with Azure, you have got an architect exam. And if you pass any of the AZ500 or the SC200, 300, or 400 exams, you then qualify to go forward to sit the SC100 exam, which is effectively the 3-star exam on the security side. If we move away from certifications, okay, and we're all living now in this digital connected social media world where we've got blogs, newsletters, and community forums, and a lot of really good people out there in the community. Okay, so obviously we have to point at the tech community. Okay, and the Microsoft tech community have their own security section. We can't talk security for Microsoft without talking about Rod Trent, and Rod sends out a weekly newsletter with lots of really great security information in there. If I can point out a couple of people in the community who are doing great things in security, Rue Campbell talks a lot about compliance. Jeffrey Appel focuses an awful lot on Defender and Sentinel side of things. And then you've got Dwayne Natwick, and Dwayne effectively talks about everything, and not just from a Microsoft side. He's heavily involved in things like ISC2, ISACA as well. So, you know, that's an example. There are some really, really great people out there to follow in the community who can, you know, really, really get you informed on Microsoft security. So in conclusion, what we're trying to do is we're trying to move away from the good old days when we were all on premise and we put a firewall in front of our perimeter and thought that was going to protect us forever. Okay, it's not that simple anymore. We're now living in a cloud first world, and what we need to do is we need to have well managed, well architected, layered defense in depth. Okay, and that's where we need to go with our cloud security. Okay, and also on top of that, we then need to have regular audits and access reviews. And thank you for not falling asleep. Okay, you can find me on any of these forums. Okay, you can find me on my blog, where I write a little bit about Azure and security. I'm always open to emails. I'm always open to people connecting with me from the community, either on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm sorry, but I can't bear to call it X for some reason. And I've also got a YouTube channel as well, where you may find a version of this presentation up there already. So that is it from me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much for great presentation. It was very great. As you know,
Thank you.
I think your presentation is a huge all of information. When you want to
Yes.
secure Azure, your presentation covers all of the topic and all of to the point items. You need to, for example, in the data side, in the identity access management, monitoring, Sentinel. Yeah, it was very great. Actually, all of you guys, if you have any question, you can ask in the chat. Don't worry if you need to more watch the this presentation. We will update this session on our YouTube channel. You can watch more, and then after that, you can communicate with Mikhail in the LinkedIn or other way to communicate and ask your question. We have a one comment. Let me share with you on the screen. David asked about the security issue. Sorry, Mikhail, you are okay.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah, we have
reading the
your
question
voice.
here. If a security issue originates from Azure and impacts our solution, what can we as Azure clients expect from Microsoft? So that really depends on the impact, and it depends on I think it depends on SLAs, and it depends on the availability that is there for your solution. So certain solutions within the Azure sphere obviously have got certain SLAs attached to them, and that can be anywhere from 99.95%, and they all depend really on things like is it deployed across availability zones? Is it deployed using a certain SKU? Is it deployed, in multi-region, things like that? Okay, there are certain guarantees that are available from Microsoft, and I think that gets into the conversation about service credits, either with you as a customer going direct to Microsoft or via your cloud service provider. Okay, but the thing about it is, and the thing you need to be careful of, and again, I'm not a Microsoft employee, I'm an MVP, but you need to initiate the contact on that. Okay, it's not something that Microsoft are going to come to you with. I'm not sure what security issue would originate from Azure. What I would say to you, Navid, I'd be interested, if you want to follow up and have a follow-up conversation on that, I'd be happy to talk to you. But yeah, I think you're getting back into SLAs there, okay? And you're getting back into the impact of a service, okay?
Yeah, great. If there's no more question, we can end this session. Thank you, Mikhail, again. Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
for having me, Mohsen. Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.